I asked Jill earlier this week what she wanted for Valentine's Day, and she said nothing. I'll find out whether she really meant that later today. I will, for you guys, by the way, I will share this little tidbit with you. Vacuum cleaners, no matter what the occasion, are not a good gift. Or mixers, yes. The most expensive vacuum cleaner I've ever seen was the one that caused severe bodily damage. Cheryl was nice enough to pass out. This was so sweet. The little Valentines. That was so nice. And it just took me back to elementary school, you know, and passing out the Valentines. And how many of you remember doing that when you were in school? And, you know, for a lot of us in this room, we go back to the days when things didn't have to be equal and fair, right? So some kids, the really popular kids in class, they got lots of Valentines, and then there were those who got a few, and then there were some who probably didn't all, you know, on that popularity scale. It's always a little awkward, but, you know, at least we weren't forced to have to give Valentines to people we didn't like. Well, Hallmark, you know, has turned this into such a huge deal. Do you know, by the way, that the Valentine card is actually just 1 year older than St. Matthew's Church? That the first Valentine's card put out by Hallmark was done in 1913, and we've been scrambling for those gifts and cards and everything ever since. The Greeting Card Association of America estimates that 145 million Valentine's cards are going to be sent out this year. For many, of course, the day even becomes a day for getting engaged. They say that 6 million American couples will get engaged on Valentine's Day. So we alluded earlier to how this whole Valentine's thing got its start, you know, with St. Valentine. Now, the legend is probably better than the real story. I'm going to share the legend with you thereby, all right? And the legend is that about 250 years after Jesus was born in Bethlehem, there was a priest by the name of Valentine who lived in Rome. Claudius was the emperor of Rome at the time, and some called him Claudius the Cruel. Now, Valentine didn't like the emperor very much, and, well, that was a feeling carried by a lot of people at the time. Claudius wanted a big army, and he thought that men should volunteer to join. The problem was that a lot of men didn't want to leave home to go off and fight in wars. They didn't want to leave their girlfriend or their wives behind. So Claudius, being the genius that he was, came up with the idea that if they banned marriage, that they would increase the size of the army. So he decreed that marriage would not be allowed. Of course, there were a lot of people who thought this was a foolish law, including Valentine. Valentine actually loved doing wedding ceremonies, so he kept doing it in secret, whispering the vows and listening for the footsteps of soldiers on the steps outside the church. Well, during one of those ceremonies, those soldiers showed up. And they arrested St. Valentine, and he was sentenced to death. But a lot of young people came and visited the jail there. They threw flowers and notes up to his window, wanting him to know that they still believed in love. One of those young people that visited Valentine was the daughter of the prison guard. Her father allowed her to visit him in his cell, and they often sat and talked for hours. She believed he did the right thing by ignoring the emperor and performing marriage ceremonies. On the day that Valentine was to be executed, he left her a note thanking her for her friendship and loyalty, and he signed it, "Love from your Valentine." That note started the custom of exchanging notes on Valentine's Day. It was written on the day he died, February 14th, 269. Now that is actually a pretty good story of how we got around to this holiday. And we tend to focus our attention on Valentine's Day on the romantic love. But it's not just romance for this holiday. That commandment in John 13 says, "A new commandment I give you, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. You are also to love one another. By this all people will know you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." In the teachings of Jesus, that word love comes up a whole lot. As a matter of fact, in the book of John, in chapters 13 through 17, just in those 4 chapters alone, the word love is mentioned over 28 times. It's an important love. But we easily wind up misinterpreting that command to love. And part of that is because, in the English language, we have one word for love. Love. See, in the ancient Greek, they had multiple words for love, depending on what kind of love it was. The love we think of for Valentine's Day in that era, romantic love, was eros. And then the other kind of love that they would reference was unconditional love, which was agape. That's what God's love for us is agape love. Unconditional. Parents understand that, right? That we love our kids no matter what our kids do. We may punish our kids for things that they do, but that doesn't change the fact that we love them. That's God's love. And it comes without any kind of strings to it whatsoever. Now, in this room, in addition to those who know about that love that a natural parent has for their child, I see the faces of people who also have learned the meaning of that kind of unconditional love in raising a child that's not theirs biologically. That agape love by choice. When Jill and I got married, Emma was about 5 years old at the time. I never once used the word step in reference to her. She was just my daughter. The only time in all of her life that I actually used a reference to her being my stepdaughter was on her wedding day, because I wanted to honor her natural father. And before I would do that, though, I sent her a note saying, "You have always been my little girl, and that doesn't change today." And I let her know that in honor of and respect for your dad, I will today and today only make reference to being your stepfather. And then we go back to business as usual from there. And then that day of the wedding, I wound up spending time with her dad, both of us in tears, crying tears of joy for the little girl that both of us had a role in raising up, who wasn't a little girl any longer. And I was able to do her ceremony and take joy in seeing her father walk her down the aisle. But others in this room have done similar. There's a very special love that comes about with the parent that decides that they adopt a child. And we've got several in this congregation that have done that. And that makes me proud of this group of people. Because you're able to show the unconditional love of God to a child that isn't yours biologically. That's amazing stuff. You see, godly love isn't focused on us. It's focused on others. Godly love is something that's totally selfless. Philippians 2, verse 3 says, "Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourself." Now, several years ago, I read a story about a military pilot who actually, he referred to that as me third. God first, other people, and then me. And he shared that with everyone he could, that was the natural order to things, was me third. God first. Second was other people. Third was me. And he lived that out until the last day of his life, when he was flying his plane and the jet developed some sort of problem and started going down. Now, he had the option to hit the ejector button and pop out of that plane. But what he realized as the plane was coming down was that it was going straight toward a neighborhood, and that dozens of innocent lives would be wiped out if that plane crashed into that residential neighborhood. And so he fought the joystick on the plane all the way down and crashed the plane in a field instead of in that residential neighborhood, losing his own life, sacrificing his life so that others could live.